hour's drive south of Charlottesville, nestled in the foothills of the Blue Ridge Mountains, lies Yogaville, a serene yoga retreat center and intentional community that promises peace, solitude, and spiritual awakenings. At first glance, it seems like paradise. Lush, wooded landscapes, delicious vegetarian meals, and smiling barefoot hippies dressed in white. But beneath this tranquil facade lies something much more sinister. Welcome to Surviving Satchidananda, the podcast that pulls back the curtain on Satchidananda Ashram, Yogaville, in Buckingham, Virginia. The guru and his devotees called the place heaven on earth, but the truth is much more complex and disturbing. On this show, we'll explore the hidden stories of fraudulent gurus, sexual abuse, sinister swamis, and much more. My name is Brianna Patten. I used to live at Yogaville, and I was deeply involved in the Integral Yoga organization for years. I first came to Yogaville when I was 21 and on a gap year from college. I quickly fell in love with the ashram and the daily routine of meditation, yoga, volunteer service, scripture study, and healthy living. I, like many others, found refuge in Yogaville. The community became my family and the ashram became my home. But the longer I stayed at Yogaville, the more disturbing things I discovered. And trust me, we will be doing a deep dive on all of it right here on this show. I ignored the red flags and problems I saw occurring at Yogaville for as long as I could, using the logic that since the ashram helped me so much, I should focus on the positive benefits and not the negatives. But these issues became harder to ignore when Yogaville was featured in the second season of Tiger King. The show delved into Doc Antle's connection to Yogaville, how he groomed underage girls, and initiated sexual relationships with them, all while he was a grown man. The show also implied that the Yogaville community failed to hold Doc Antle accountable and keep the girls safe. Then in 2022, a letter was published that was written by Shanti Norris, one of Swami Satchidananda's former secretaries, and I couldn't ignore the red flags anymore. The letter detailed the non-consensual sexual encounters she had with the guru. As these revelations were making shockwaves throughout the integral yoga community, it was also revealed that the guru cultivated father-daughter relationships with many more of his young devotees before he took advantage of them. Then even more people came forward with allegations of abuse they experienced at Yogaville, including former students stating that they were abused at Yogaville school when they were children. I feel so conflicted about Yogaville and the time I spent there. On one hand, the experience was beautiful and healing, and I learned so much and made a lot of close friends that I still talk to this day. But on the other hand, the place is so incredibly toxic and cult-like, and it was very detrimental to me in many ways. Throughout this podcast, I'll share my complicated relationship with the ashram, with the help of experts and other former integral yoga devotees, to reveal the toxic underbelly of the so-called sanctuary. Join us as we uncover concealed narratives and illuminate the dark side of Yogaville. In this episode, I'm going to tell the story of my mantra initiation, a secret ceremonial ritual I underwent at Yogaville. After that, I've invited former integral yoga devotee and trauma therapist Karla Helbert to share some of her personal experiences with the organization, along with her professional opinion about the integral yoga controversies. I'm so glad that you're embarking on this journey with us. This is Surviving Satchidananda, Episode 1, Initiation. You will find out more after the initiation, the Swami in the saffron robe told us, looking down her nose. She was sitting above us on a comfortable chair as we sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounding her in a semicircle like we were preschoolers. I was holding a booklet that was labeled Mantra Initiation, with a photo of Swami Satchidananda on the cover. I had heard whispers about mantra initiation throughout my years at Yogaville, but I still didn't really understand much about it. I was pretty sure it was a ceremony where you received a secret mantra and accepted Swami Satchidananda as your guru, but I could have been wrong, and I was at this meeting to find out. A fellow spiritual seeker in the group had asked the monk leading the information session if we all received the same mantra. The answer to this question would have revealed too much, which explained her curt response. The Swami continued, "Mantra initiation is an act of faith. It formalizes one's relationship with their guru. The guru actually takes on some of your karma during the initiation, which accelerates you on your spiritual path toward enlightenment." In the years I spent living at Yogaville, I had seen many guests take the mantra initiation ritual after their first month or so at the ashram, and then they would get a Sanskrit name to complete their new identity. I was very hesitant to get initiated and had been pushing off the rite of passage for more than 3 years. But since I'd been involved at Yogaville for a while and experienced so many benefits from the practices and teachings, I felt open enough to the idea to attend the meeting about initiation led by the top Yogaville Swami, now that Swami Satchidananda was dead. "So if some of our bad karma is removed during the initiation, does that mean it makes your life easier?" I asked. "Quite the opposite," the Swami replied, stretching the corners of her lips towards her ears into a creepy mechanical smile. "The initiation is a commitment to one's spiritual growth, and this commitment can actually make things in your life more turbulent. Getting initiated will not rid your life of challenges, but it will give you strength to face those challenges." There was a long pause, the air filled with silent confusion. "Are there any more questions?" she asked. When no one answered, Swami dismissed us with the reminder to return our applications to her mailbox by the end of the next day. I was on the fence about formalizing my relationship with Swami Satchidananda by getting the mantra initiation, but then I reflected on my experience at Yogaville. I had come to the ashram a depressed wreck not long after a suicide attempt. Swami Satchidananda's integral yoga teachings in the community transformed my life for the better. I was a lot healthier. It seemed like the right decision to make in the moment, so I filled out the application and dropped it in the Swami's mailbox. The next day, I was notified that my application had been accepted and the ceremony would take place at the end of the week. To prepare my vessel for the sacred mantra, I embarked on a 3-day fast. By day 3, I was in a familiar lucid state that I had cultivated many times before by fasting and doing intense spiritual practices. My mind was so quiet and my belly so empty. Freshly showered and wearing all white clothing like I was instructed, I took my seat in the Guru Bhavan meditation hall with the other 2 women who were receiving the mantra with me. Swami explained the ritual she was about to perform. "We are going to perform a puja, but first I'm going to ask Gurudev to make his presence known. He's always with us, but let's ask that Gurudev show us his presence in a special way that we humans can recognize on this earthly plane." The Swami began the puja, and I developed deep concentration. I was transfixed by the offerings of milk and incense, and the chants invoking the presence of the Guru. Swami addressed us again. "I'm now going to give you the mantra, which I have written on small sheets of paper for you." She handed me and the other 2 women small strips of paper with the secret syllables on them, and spent a few minutes teaching us how to recite it properly. "Now I'm going to come behind each of you and touch your head. Continue repeating the mantra as I touch you." I began repeating the mantra out loud with the others in the room, anxiously awaiting the Swami's touch. I was the last in line. She finally walked toward me, and as her cold finger touched the crown of my skull, I felt a bolt of electricity. After the electric flash waned, I felt the sensation of warm honey dripping down my spine. When the honey reached the base of my spine, I felt the electricity shoot back up to the crown of my head. As soon as the sensation returned to my crown, Swami removed her finger and returned to the front of the room. As the ceremony concluded, I couldn't help but wonder what this initiation truly meant. I felt as if I was starting a mysterious new chapter of my life. As I left the meditation hall, the weight of the initiation settled upon my shoulders, mingling with a sense of anticipation. I walked to the dining hall with my fellow initiates and broke my fast with a banana and a glass of water. All right, so that was the story of my mantra initiation. You learned a little bit more about me and about some of the rituals that go on at Yogaville. There's a lot more where that came from. But I would like to argue that there are actually 2 initiations that all integral yoga followers must go through. One is the formal ceremony that I just described, and the other is the informal initiation where you learn about all the crazy shit and the horrifying allegations that are against the guru, the founder, Swami Satchidananda. In our next segment, I'm going to delve into this complex second initiation with Karla Helbert. Karla is a licensed professional counselor, an internationally certified yoga therapist, and a certified meditation instructor. She's also the award-winning author of the groundbreaking book Yoga for Grief and Loss, which I highly recommend. Karla offers valuable insight not only as someone who was an integral yoga leader for decades, but as a professional therapist who understands how grief and trauma impact the brain and body. Let's uncover more with Karla. So Karla, when did you start practicing yoga and how were you introduced to the practice of yoga?
I started taking yoga classes at the Integral Yoga Center of Richmond, late 90s, 98, 99. And we did, the basic integral yoga class. So I didn't know that there was any other kind of yoga. I never did any other kind of yoga and took classes there probably for a couple of years. And then I saw that Nora Posey is my teacher, and she was doing a teacher training. And I thought, ooh, that sounds like something I want to do. And I thought, ooh, this yoga training will really help me with my job. And I'm going to teach these kids at school, and I'm going to use it as this help my career thing. And I really had no clue, at the time that when I started that training, that it would really be life-changing.
When you first entered these spaces, how did you get introduced to Swami Satchidananda? I'm assuming that there was photos of him.
Oh, for sure. Well, you know what it looks like. So there's the yantra, and we have Swami Satchidananda, and we have Sivananda, Master Sivananda on the other side, right? So I didn't think anything too crazy about it because I'm really open to, I would say, one thing I like to say about myself is I'm kind of spiritually promiscuous. So I was raised in fundamentalist Christian churches. And then when I left home and went to college, started looking into Buddhism. And up till that time, too, I had actively practiced Wicca. And the truth is one and paths are many, to me, was just really spoke to me. And at that point, I really did not know very much at all about the Hindu pantheon. So learning all of that, and honestly, Patanjali sutras were just, to me, it was the most fascinating part for me. I was just like, oh, this is awesome. This, I really, really embraced the sutras. So the Richmond teacher training program for many years was a 6-month long program. And as part of the teacher training, we did a 4-day immersion retreat at Yogaville. And so I started the teacher training in October, and in November we had our retreat. And so that was my first real introduction to Yogaville and all of the swamis and Swami Satchidananda and Chidambaram and the Lotus and all of that stuff. And it was just awe-inspiring. The first meditation period, we could go up, and we went up to visit Chidambaram, where I did with a few other people. And when I walked into that space, I just started crying. I mean, it makes me cry still. And I just thought, oh my gosh, this is the place. And I felt this immediate connection with him. it was a really strange experience for me that first time because I was like, what is this? And I didn't really talk to anybody about it. So I was like, well, I don't know what all that means, but I think this feels good. And so that's what I'm going to go with. And that was the beginning of sort of my relationship with him and with integral yoga beyond taking the classes at the center. All of that was really life altering for me. And no, I never met him in the body. So he died or took Mahasamadhi, in August of that year. And then I started my teacher training later. I never met him in the body.
So after you got your certification, how were you feeling? You were like kind of like all in with integral yoga? What happened?
Well, yeah, pretty much. I mean, so right after I was certified, I started teaching classes every week at the school where I worked, and I started teaching at the Y. But then in 2005, my baby was born. And then when he was 3 months old, he was diagnosed with a brain tumor, and he died 6 months to the day after his diagnosis. And so that again was this life-changing thing for me. When you go through that kind of traumatic grief, it is life altering and universe shattering, and everything that you think is true about the universe suddenly is not. And so even with yoga, I was mad at yoga. I was angry at a lot of things, but I could not be on it. Like I couldn't do any asana. I would just be furious about it and start crying. And it didn't feel comfortable, which grief does not feel comfortable. But what I could do is chant. And so I did. I chanted a lot throughout that whole grief period. But then sort of later on, there's an organization I do a lot of work with called the Myth Foundation, which I started going to support group meetings with them. And when the facilitator found out that I was a therapist, she asked me to help facilitate the groups. And so I did. And then we used to have this conference that happened every 2 years. And so the first year when he died, there was a conference and I was not ready to go. And then the next year in 2008, I was pregnant with my daughter. And the next year I had this like new baby, and the next conference I had this new baby and didn't want to go. And then in 2012, I was like, I really want to go to this thing. So I was like, okay, I'm going to submit a proposal for a workshop. And then I was like, well, what can I present on? I don't know what I can talk about. And I was like, well, I could do something on yoga and grief. And so I sat down and I really revisited my training, and I was like, okay, well, let me look at each of these branches of yoga and see like how are each of them really like supportive in grief. And I made all these notes and I wrote all this stuff, and I ended up creating this little PDF document with basic information about each thing and some practices and different stuff. And I did teach the workshop. And then I came home and somebody said, oh, you should put that little PDF on your website. And I thought, and my publisher had this rule about we get a chance to look at anything you write. So I didn't know if that counted. So I asked them and they said, oh, can we see the document? And I said, okay, sure. And then they wrote me back and said, can you write a full-length book about this? And I immediately was like, yeah, of course I can do that. And then that was a whole process. And so within the writing of that book, Yoga for Grief and Loss, I really dove so much deeper into yoga practices and what I had learned. And like through that, deepen even more like my connection to Swami Satchidananda and how I felt. And that book, I sent it out to a bunch of swamis, Prunananda, Sarvananda, Sokananda, all these people like read the book and have recommended the book and all these different things. And then I started doing programs for Yogaville. Like they hosted me, and they put me in the calendar and all this kind of stuff. And so it was really like this place. Not only did I consider it my spiritual home, but it was this place that I could go to and share what I had learned and how yoga had helped me in the darkest part of my life.
And so you started with integral yoga in the 90s, and it helped you through many difficult times in your life. When did you first start hearing that Swami Satchidananda may have been doing things that were in conflict with the teachings?
Well, I remember hearing these like rumors early on. So like in the late 90s, early 2000s. And I honestly cannot remember where or who first said something to me because I remember kind of trying to Google it. And this was like early, like 2000. There wasn't a lot out there. Actually, I don't even think Google existed at that time. But I was searching the internet for anything. And I remember finding this article that had a photo, a newspaper article that had a photo of people protesting outside. I think it was in Charlottesville where he was speaking. And I was like, wait, what is that? Is there something to that? And then there was an article on a cult finding website where, what is that guy's name? Rick somebody, I think.
Rick Ross.
Yes, Rick Ross's website, where he told a specific story of a woman whose family claim, I'm sure you know the story, claimed that she'd been like taken away and brainwashed I will say for me, I was like, I don't believe that at all. Like my experience of Yogaville and any people involved was not cult like at all. I don't know, but yeah, I heard rumors, and I will say, and I didn't really ask anybody about it at that point, but then as time kind of went on, and I served as a mentor in the Richmond teacher training program several years, and invariably somebody who was taking the teacher training program would come up to me, and I think they did it because they know I'm a therapist and a counselor and whatever, and they're like, did you hear about this? I heard this, or somebody told me this, or so and so sent me this email. And I had to talk to a lot of people about it, and I had no information to give them. And I would say, well, this is what I heard. And then eventually I did ask about it. I asked my teacher, Nora Vimala. Um, I think I asked a couple of other people, but I was always it was like, no, those are just stories. And it was just totally dismissed. Now, Nora is the only one who really said, I really don't know. We heard these things. I've heard these things. I've asked about them, and I was told that none of it was true. I remember thinking, well, like, what possible reason would anybody have for making that up? And why would these women stand outside and hold up signs if something wasn't true? And I think, like so many other people, I didn't want to think that that was true. I'm a therapist. I believe people when they tell me they've been abused. You believe them. People tend not to make those things up. Does it ever happen? Sure, it's happened, but almost always people are telling you the truth. So I think I really just I didn't want to really go there because I didn't want to think, oh my God, how could would he really do something? And I didn't know him, but to me, he was like this, I never even really, until recently, really thought about, they call this this bhakti tradition, but I never really thought about him as a God, a person in God form. I didn't even think I realized that there are people who really believe that. I believe that he definitely was an incredibly special person who had incredible spiritual powers. But I never thought of him as a god or that he was actually divine. And having like learned that there are people who believe that, that to me, if I'd known that earlier, I might have been like, oh, maybe they are kind of a cult. I actually remember one time like having taught a program and being at satsang, and this guy was there who was like not in my program, but he happened to just he was there with some friends and had never been there before, and this was all new to him. And we were chanting, and we were chanting the Satchidananda Guru chant, right? And the dude's like, hey, are they like chanting his name? Are they chanting to him? I was like, no. He's just named that. Satchit Ananda means truth, knowledge, bliss. So really they're chanting to truth, knowledge, bliss, which is how I thought. But really they were chanting to him. At least like a lot of them were, so there's this whole faction of them that see him as this divine being who can do no wrong. And that is so dangerous when these things are happening and have happened. My mind's ability to process it, that just made no sense to me. Which, I mean, if I felt that way, like imagine how those women who find themselves in this position must have felt. Like, here is Guru Dev doing this stuff to me. What? And so this again, like, gets to this point of like, oh, these were consensual relationships. No, they were not. That consent is impossible when you have any kind of power differential, much less this guru, this man who has changed your life, perhaps saved your life with the teachings of integral yoga and this space where you now live, and you have this community and everything in your life is different, and he is elevated as this divine being with a direct line to all the gods, and you're supposed to say no. I mean, come on.
Mm-hmm.
Seriously, consensual.
Mm-hmm. So what was it about the 2022 reports that changed it for you?
Well, I mean, I think a lot of people will remember the Tiger King show on Netflix, which I watched, but I didn't watch it until I had heard that there was like stuff in there about Yogaville. And I was like, what? And so I watched it and I was like, wow. And I just thought, okay, this is really going to stir some things up. And then after that came the other Netflix special specific to Doc Antle. And then it got even worse. And it was after that that a lot of people can, I think Shanti Wagner, that's when she came, her letter was released after that. And so in the meantime, like I had already been asked to teach the module for yoga and psychology and mental health. And I had spent so much time creating this course. It was completely like original. I talked to Swami Ramananda and I was like, look, I'm going to talk about relationship between client and yoga therapist and the power differential. I have to discuss this. And I know it's going to come up. These things are going to come up in my class and I have to talk about it. And he told me, he was like, you say whatever you need to say and do whatever you need to do. And I was like, okay, thank you. But then stuff just started getting worse and like more things were coming out. And I was approached by other people in the organization, not in leadership, who shared information with me. The person who came to me had a whole book of things that they had collected, all this information that I didn't know about beforehand, letters that people had written, more clippings, like they had like all these like copies of things. And I'm not saying who it was or even what was in the book because they have not given me permission to do that. But I was blown away, and they were coming to me like for support and help, and I was just like, oh my God, okay, I have to stay, calm because this person is coming to me for help in processing it and dealing with it themselves. I can't then start like freaking out, but I was freaking out. I was just like, oh my gosh, like what? Then I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. Like what's going to happen? And so there was a lot of, conversation from other teachers and people who were asking the organization to do something. I sent a statement from me. I wrote it to Ramananda, and then he said, can I share this with the board? And I said, sure. And it was from my perspective as an integral yogi and also as a psychotherapist and a trauma specialist that please, say something. This is causing harm. And it was totally ignored. And as it went further along and nothing happened, I was just like, I cannot continue to be professionally associated with this organization. And that's when I wrote them a letter and quit basically, which didn't mean I was just quitting the faculty position in Integral Yoga's yoga therapy program, but all of my programs, teaching, like doing the workshops and retreats for yoga for grief and loss and for the chakras and grief and trauma and anything new that I might come up with. And it was really, and I was like, well, I can't, that's the end of my connection with integral yoga. And it was really painful. Mm. And not just like, okay, now I don't have a space to share these teachings, or now I can't go back to what I consider my spiritual home. But then the bigger thing of these people in this organization that I consider life-changing for me, just continue to thwart and just stomp really on the teachings of yoga and create more and more and more harm. And it's such a conundrum because I do not want to see Yogaville fail. I love so many people there. And like you said, the people who still live there and work there, who make the food there, who teach yoga there, who do all the things that keep it running, and they have families and it's their livelihood. I don't want to see it go away. But at the same time, it's like, how can people continue to go and share the teachings there and be okay with what the leadership is failing to address? I don't understand it. I really don't.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just me. Like I know of instances where swamis have contacted other people and yelled and screamed at them and called them betrayers and I know about those events, and I cannot go there and look at these people anymore. And the same way,
Yeah.
it just reminds me so much of one of the major reasons I left the church in the first place.
Mm.
It's happened several times that a lot of people who come to me as a therapist know about my books. And so then when I've had people say, oh, I'm thinking about going to Yogaville, I've had to tell several people, okay, this is what's happened and this is what's still happening. I'm not telling you not to go because it's a beautiful place and the food is amazing. And there's so many people who are there who are beautiful, amazing people. But I would feel remiss. I would not be able to let you leave my office without telling you that this is the background.
Mm-hmm.
No, I just can't do it. And before, when it used to happen, I'd be like, I don't know. Here's what I've heard. I have no idea if it's true. I was told it's not. But now if I would be like, yes, it did happen. He did do that. What has happened is awful. I mean, it just kept getting worse and worse. All the stories,
Mm-hmm.
worse and worse and worse.
Mm-hmm.
And not just him and what he did, but what the community did.
Mm-hmm.
The shunning of these people and the, dragging them out when they try to stand up and say what has happened, like physically removing them from a room, calling them liars and calling them crazy and all of these things. I mean, it is just harm upon harm.
In your resignation letter, you wrote that the ashram's statement mentions yama and niyama, yet every single one of those principles was violated, not only by Swami Satchidananda, but by the organization both then and now. And you expanded a little bit upon that, but is there anything else that you can say about how integral yoga leadership is currently violating these yogic principles?
Well, in my mind, I mean, so all of them, all 10 of them are violated. But so in my mind, and what I learned is that Ahimsa is the basis for everything. And you can't practice any of the other ones if you're not practicing the first one. Like if you're not truly practicing Ahimsa, which, is non-harm, non-violence, then you can't really practice Satya, which is telling the truth. By keeping a truth from somebody or misleading somebody, you can cause harm. By not telling what's true, you can cause harm. When it's something like this, you can't keep that truth because keeping things from people damages relationships, or outright lying to people damages relationships. And then the middle part, your own self, you are the most important person to you in your life. And if you're not telling your own self the truth, then you're damaging yourself and other people. And I think a lot of these people who continue to deny this, they are like, I mean, I think they really know. I know that they actually know, but they continue to lie to themselves on some level, either about the fact that it happened or didn't happen or whatever they say to themselves, but also that by not coming forward and by not being public, they're somehow protecting him or protecting the organization when what they're doing is causing more and more and more harm. So Satya and then Asteya, so the stealing that's been going on, like this, the taking of people's trust and the taking of people's spiritual innocence, not to mention what he took from the women that he abused. And so the things that continue to get, and you and me and so many other people who now have had our spiritual home taken away from us. And somebody might say, well, that's your choice. But no, it isn't, because they really are in control of this, because there's things they could do. They could still change it and make things better. You can't fix what's happened or what he did, but you can change things moving forward. And so like every one of those yamas and the niyamas is based on Ahimsa. And all of them are just falling off. And for Yogaville and integral yoga to not be practicing that, stop causing this harm. Start telling the truth. Stop taking all these things away from people. I mean, start living the actual walk. The way that they are treating this is draining the vital life force from the entire organization and every person who is an integral yogi. I mean, so that's how they're violating brahmacharya. I mean, we could do a whole show on like how are they actually violating the yamas and niyamas, but they are. Mm-hmm. And it's heartbreaking.
Mm-hmm. When you resigned, you left some action steps that you said could help move the organization forward towards healing and reconciliation. One of your suggestions was creating support systems for survivors and others who may need it. So as a psychotherapist, a trauma therapist, and yoga practitioner and therapist, what would these support systems look like?
I would want to talk to, if they wanted to talk about it, the people who actually are the survivors and the people who have been harmed, and say, what do you need? I mean, and maybe they don't know, but I bet a lot of them would know. And then, maybe it looks like setting up support group spaces for them, or setting up counseling if they would need it. And I think a lot of them probably have already gotten it, but also not by somebody within the organization necessarily, unless that person's not going to be an apologist, but somebody who's actually going to help these people move through it. But then having, I think you were part of several of these like meetings that a lot of us had, where we were able to say, here's my feelings right now. So not just for the people who have been directly harmed by the abuse, but by all these other people who've been indirectly harmed by the revelations, and then also the inaction and the damage that the people in leadership then and now have continued to perpetrate. For all of us to have spaces of some kind that is sanctioned by them. Like, we were doing all this, worried that, there's going to be a spy or something like showing up and then going back and telling everybody on the board what we're saying, which is just horrible. And then that sounding board group that was on Facebook, that people were coming in there and then hearing what people were sharing and then going back and taking it to other, like the board and all the people, it's like, what, why? Like, having transparency. And like you said, reconciliation, like there are plenty of ways that they can go find out what they need, like hire people outside of the organization who have experience in working with this kind of spiritual betrayal in spiritual and religious organizations. And when you have allegations and revelations of sexual abuse, there's places and people that can help walk organizations through this in ways that promote healing and ultimately help them to come out even stronger. And it can happen, but it's like they're not even interested. They're just interested in like closing ranks and deny, and get rid of anybody who is not just like saying the party line. I don't understand. I really don't understand it, because I think this has been going on for a long time, and it's entrenched.
Mm-hmm.
And, even looking back, I mean, of course, like there's so many little signs you can look at and be like, that's strange, or that's weird, or that doesn't seem very loving. And I'm not even living there. So, I mean, I know for people who are living there, there's a whole lot more you see. But just even the time that I spent there, it's like, people being afraid to say things or do things, or even when I first started, like being like scared that you're going to get in trouble if you say anything too loud or whatever. It's just like, that's weird. There's so many little things that just point to dysfunction that is like underneath so much more damage and even beyond dysfunction.
Wow. I am so grateful that people like Karla Helbert exist, because without people like her, I would think that I was batshit crazy. There's so much gaslighting and lying that goes on at Yogaville, so that at any point when you raise a question or a concern, or why does that happen, there are so many people that make you feel like you're the crazy one for questioning the absolute authority of a man who died, Swami Satchidananda, and the authority of the Board of Trustees. And Karla also brought up so many of the complexities that go along with this type of trauma that we've all had since being involved with the Integral Yoga organization. I'm sad that my spiritual home was stolen from me. I love the way that she put that, and how the theft that is taking place on so many different levels. The sadness, the anger, the frustration. It's so much to deal with, and I'm so glad that there are a lot of people out there. I mean, I'm not happy that there are so many people that have shared this experience, but at the same time, I'm glad to know that I'm not alone. Make sure you check out Karla's books. She has 3 books: Yoga for Grief and Loss, The Chakras in Grief and Trauma, and Finding Your Own Way to Grieve. These, I haven't read all of them yet. I've only read Yoga for Grief and Loss, and it's amazing. And we all have experienced grief, and I personally believe that we all probably need more help in learning how to navigate grief of all different kinds. We have unpacked so much in this episode, and we have not even scratched the surface yet. So if you listen this far, thank you so much. And I will see you next time on Surviving Satchidananda.